Hi there and welcome to Beaux-Arts Creative University's free ECD course. This video will cover cognitive development in the early childhood. As children progress through the childhood period, their thinking becomes more sophisticated and organized. What is especially noteworthy is that as they get older, their thinking becomes more elaborated and less vague. During the preschool years, children are constantly expanding their knowledge about the physical and social world. All the links, resources, and references will be put in the description below. But now let's get on with the lesson. As always, I'll be your host/lecturer. My name is Vincent Lee Lloyd. Feel free to check out the company that I work for, which is Beaux-Arts Kraftz, Beaux-Arts Creativity. The website is down below, and you can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Alright, so let's get started with the theories of cognitive development. There will be various theories. We'll get to that let's really go to the next. We'll be discussing the following theories. The following theories are Piaget's theories. Then some people have expanded on his theories. They'll be called the Neo-piagetians. Then we'll be looking at the child as a theorist. We'll be looking at Vygotsky's theory. And then, also interesting, we'll be having a look at the theory of information processing. But without further ado, let's get... Alright, so kicking it off with Piaget's theory, which is the pre-operational stage. I've included a picture of Piaget over there. Piaget used the term operation to indicate an action or mental representation carried out through logical thinking. The term pre-operational thinking refers to illogical thinking, which implies that they are not yet ready to engage in logical mental operations. The pre-operational stage lasts from the age of 2 to the age of 7 and is generally subdivided into the symbolic or preconceptual period and the intuitive period. The symbolic or preconceptual period is between the ages of 2 and 4 years, and the intuitive period is between the age of 4 and 7 years. The symbolic period is characterized by the increasingly complex use of words or mental representations, such as words, numbers, or images to which the child attaches meanings. During the intuitive period, however, children begin to use primitive reasoning and want to know the answers to all kinds of questions, which is why they keep on asking why. Although they start developing their own ideas about the world in which they live, the ideas are still simple and not well considered. Piaget calls this substage intuitive because young children seem so sure about their knowledge and understanding yet are unaware of how they know and what they know. This means they know something but know it without the use of rational thinking. Although children show some advances in their thinking, certain immaturities are also evident. This will be discussed now. So, the advantages of pre-operational thought. A major development during this stage involves symbolic or mental representation. Several kinds of representation, such as deferred imitation, symbolic play and spoken language are apparent in children. Now, deferred imitation. Deferred imitation refers to the ability to repeat the behavior of a model that is no longer present. Symbolic play or pretend play refers to substituting imaginary situations for real ones, such as pretending to have tea with the play tea set, using a broomstick as a horse, and using blocks to substitute cars. Spoken language. The single most evident development during the pre-operational period is development of spoken language. According to Piaget, during the sensory motor period, the child has to carry out actions to think. With the development of language, thinking occurs through representation of actions rather than actions alone. The ability to use words and to understand their symbolic meaning gives a completely new meaning and significance to the child's world. Alright, so let's look at some immature aspects of pre-operational thought. According to Piaget, the main impediments to logical thinking are perceptual centration, irreversibility, egocentrism, animism, and transductive reasoning. Okay, so let's look at the first one. What is perceptual centration? Now this refers to the tendency to attend to only one attribute of what one observes and to ignore the rest. Preoperational thinkers seem unable to explore all aspects of a stimulus. They tend to center their attention on what to them appears to be the more salient. As a result of not being able to process multiple characteristics and dimensions, they tend to make perceptual errors. Now that may sound very academic, but let's give you an example. They think that pouring water from a short wide glass into a taller thinner glass means that there's now more water. Or another example is when a clay is stretched out in an elongated form, that there is now more clay. Obviously there is not. Let's move on to irreversibility. Now this refers to an inability to reverse an operation. Referring to the above example, young children cannot mentally pour the water from the tall glass back into the short wide glass. Similarly, they do not understand the logic behind simple mathematical subtraction or reversal problems such as 2 plus 3 equals 5. Therefore, 5 minus 3 must equal to 2. Thirdly, egocentrism. According to Piaget, this refers to the tendency of young children to view the world from their own perspective. They fail to recognize that others may have different points of view and think the universe centers around them. Now, it actually seems like a few adults haven't left that stage. Anyways, animistic thinking. Now, animistic thinking is the tendency, according to Piaget, of young children to assume that non-living objects such as the sun, moon, wind, rocks, and dolls have thoughts, feelings, and motives. For example, on a very hot day, a 3-year-old might say, "I wish the sun would go to the clouds." Okay, and lastly, let's look at transductive reasoning. Now, this refers to preoperational thinkers' tendency to reason from one particular instance to another particular instance, linking two events that occur close together in a cause and effect fashion, whether it is logical or not. For example, a child may think that her parents divorced because she is naughty. Another example is that a 5-year-old boy who ran his tricycle into an electrical pole at the same time of a massive power failure after a storm. The little boy saw the lights go out and believed that he caused the blackout and was expecting punishment for breaking the power system. It's a very interesting theory that Piaget has, but now let us evaluate it. So current research findings do not support Piaget's portrayal of young children as being animistic, illogical, or egocentric. For example, research has failed to find any significant degree of animism in young children, especially when asked about familiar objects such as whether a wind-up toy can feel any pain. Only very young children, such as 3-year-olds, seem to show a general uncertainty about the properties of many objects. When older children make errors in this regard, their responses result from incomplete knowledge about certain objects, not from a general belief that the inanimate objects are alive. Similarly, children also seem to be less egocentric than Piaget believed. For example, preschoolers can take the perspectives of others if the task is made meaningful and understandable. Generally, the 3-mountain task, which I'll link below, is considered to be too difficult. Studies of the children's emotional development and theory of mind, which is the ability to understand others' thoughts and feelings, also reveal that many preschoolers are able to display empathy and awareness of how other people feel. In addition, researchers have also indicated that children's number concept and ability to classify develop much earlier than Piaget indicated. By the age of 4, most children can compare quantities and solve numerical ordinality problems. For example, Julie picked 6 apples and Jenny picked 4 apples. Who picked more? Also, they can already classify by 2 criteria, shape and color. By the age of 5, they are able to apply the cardinality principle in counting. By the time children enter primary school, most of them have developed basic number sense, including number transformations, estimation, and recognition of number patterns. 2 plus 2 equals 4, and so does 3 plus 1. However, preschool experience affects children's development in these skills. Alright, so let's move on to the Neo-piagetians. There are two main cognitive psychologists that are considered Neo-piagetians. These are Fischer and Robbie Case. Both have their own unique point of views. So Neo-piagetians, now they are theorists who have expanded on rather than contradicted Piaget's theory. But they have also challenged Piaget's claim that clearly defined cognitive structures associated with distinct stages play a major role in determining children's problem-solving abilities. So, according to the Neo-piagetians, if these assumptions were correct, there should be consistency in a variety of tasks at each of the 4 stages of cognitive development. However, there is evidence of uneven performance on different tasks and even on the same tasks at all stages. For example, children generally grasp the conservation of liquid before they understand the conservation of mass. Now, the conservation of liquid is the liquid from a tall, thin glass is equal to the same liquid poured into a short, wide glass. And then the conservation of mass is the example I gave with the ball of clay rolled out into a sausage contains the same amounts of clay as a ball of clay. So to address these inconsistencies, cognitive psychologists Robbie Case and Kurt Fischer have studied children's cognitive development from a more domain, task, and context-specific perspective. Now, although Fischer agrees that cognitive development is an action-based, self-regulating, and constructive process, he disagrees that there is a generalized competence or cognitive structure. According to him, cognitive development should be described for each skill or task and in every different context. Now, for example, a girl who counts out 4 sweets for herself is exhibiting a specific numerical skill in that specific context. This does not imply that she will be able to apply numerical skills in all contexts. This means that children show some specific skills or tasks in certain situations or in a certain context, but may not be able to show similar skills in other situations. Fischer also emphasizes environmental support, such as a helpful parent in cognitive development. For example, if a child is engaging in dramatic play pretending to be a doctor, a parent may explain how a stethoscope works or may demonstrate how to bandage a wound, thereby providing environmental support. Merely leaving the object with the child would signify low levels of support. Fischer found that children who receive high levels of environmental support function at high levels of cognitive competence. Now, Robbie Case, like Piaget, maintains that children's thinking develops in stages. However, the stage-like progression is not due to cognitive structures as Piaget indicated. According to Robbie Case, children's thinking is influenced by what he calls executive processing space. Executive processing space refers to an active, temporary conscious memory and therefore to the maximum number of schemes children can activate at any one time. So according to Case, there is a limit on how many schemes may be attended to in this executive processing space and refers to the maximum number as the operational efficiency. Improvement in operational efficiency occurs through both practice and brain maturation as the child gets older. Thus, a 7-year-old is better able to handle conservation tasks than a 4-year-old because of improvements in operational efficiency. Okay, now we go to the child as a theorist. Many theorists believe that children, like scientists, formulate theories about how the world works. Children's theories are usually called naive theories because, unlike real scientific theories, they are not created by specialists and are not evaluated by formal research. Naive theories are nevertheless valuable because they allow children and adults to understand new experiences and predict new events. According to the core knowledge hypothesis, children are born with a very basic knowledge of this world. This knowledge is elaborated based on a child's experiences. Some of the theories that children first develop concern physics, biology, and psychology. This means that infants and toddlers rapidly develop theories that organize their knowledge about the properties of living and non-living objects. Young children can almost be seen as very tiny scientists. They see each and every new object in the world as a new specimen that should be looked at in greater detail. They might even, I know that a lot of young kids, they investigate objects by putting it into their mouth, like the first time they see a paintbrush or a I don't know, maybe a piece of clay, they also put it in their mouth to just experience it. And once that child has experienced let's say the taste of clay, and they taste that and they see that it tastes horrible, they won't do it again. So they have learned from their previous experience. Anyways, let's get back to the topic at hand. So naive physics. This refers to a person's understanding of objects and their properties. For example, that an unsupported object could fall. Researchers have discovered through innovative research methods involving monitoring infants' looking behavior that infants are aware of many important basic facts about objects. They know, for instance, that a hard physical object cannot move through another hard physical object. By the middle of the first year, babies also understand that one object striking a second object could cause the latter to move. Towards the end of the first year, they also show an understanding that an unsupported object could fall and that a tall object will be partially hidden by a short object. Obviously, infants do not understand objects at the level of a physics student. The important point is, however, that infants rapidly create a reasonably accurate theory of some basic properties of objects, a theory that helps them to expect that objects such as toys will act in predictable ways. Now, moving on to naive biology. Fundamental to naive biology is the distinction between living, animate, and non-living, inanimate objects. Motion is critical to the early understanding of the difference between animate and inanimate objects. By 12 to 15 months, infants have determined the animate objects are self-propelled, or that they can move in irregular paths, and act to achieve goals, such as open a cupboard to get a toy. By early childhood, children's naive theories of biology have come to include many of the properties associated with living objects. For example, many 4-year-olds' theories of biologies include the following elements. Number 1, movement. They can understand that animals can move themselves, but inanimate objects can be moved only by other objects or by people. Number 2, growth. They understand that animate objects such as animals get bigger and physically more complex, but the inanimate objects such as a teddy bear do not. Number 3, internal parts. They know that the insides of animate objects contain different materials from the insides of inanimate objects. Preschool children judge that blood and bones are more likely to be inside an animate object, but that hard and soft material is more likely to be inside an inanimate object. Number 4, inheritance. They realize that only living objects have offspring who resemble their parents. Asked to maintain why a puppy is black, preschoolers would say that the mommy is black. That's why the puppy is black. In other words, they probably take biological characteristics into account. And if asked to explain why a phone is black, they have mechanical causes, such as a worker painted it, and not biological ones. And the last one, healing. Children believe that when injured, animate objects could heal or be healed, whereas inanimate objects must be fixed by humans. For example, they know that a person's scraped knee will heal, but a doll's scraped knee will not. Findings such as the aforementioned indicate that during early childhood, children's naive theories of biology become more complex. Obviously, their theories are not complete and include misconceptions. Nevertheless, children's naive theories of biology, when joined with their naive theories of physics, provide powerful tools for making sense of their world and for understanding new experiences. So, naive psychology and theory of mind. Okay, so let's break this down. Naive psychology refers to individuals' tendencies to try and explain why people act as they do. Now, and theory of mind, shortened to TOM, specifies to a set of opinions constructed by a child and adult to explain other people's ideas, beliefs, desires, and behaviors. One of the leading researchers of this field, Henry Wellman, believes that children's theory of mind develops through 3 phases during the preschool years. The earliest phase, common in 2-year-olds, children are aware of desires and often communicate these desires. Additionally, they often link their desires to their behavior. Thus, by the age of 2, children understand that they and other people have desires and that their desires may cause behavior. By the age of 3, an important change takes place. Now children clearly distinguish the mental world from the physical one. For example, if told about Betty, who has a biscuit, and Julie, who is thinking about a biscuit, most 3-year-olds know that Betty's biscuit can be seen, touched, and eaten. In addition, 3-year-olds use mental verbs, such as think, believe, remember, and forget, which suggest they have an initial understanding of different mental states. A mental state refers to a person's beliefs or thinks about something or someone. However, although 3-year-olds talk about thoughts, they emphasize desires when trying to explain why people act as they do. At the age of 4, mental states become important in children's understanding of their own and other people's actions. This means that by 4 years, children understand that their own and other people's behavior is based on their beliefs about events and situations, even when those beliefs are wrong. This developmental transformation is particularly evident in the false belief tasks, such as the one shown in the next slide. So this is an example of false belief tasks. In all of these tasks, the situation is set up so that the child has accurate information, but someone else does not. For example, in the story in the figure, the child being tested knows that the marble is really in the box, but Sally, the girl in the story, believes that the marble is still in the basket. 4-year-olds will correctly say that Sally will look for the marble in the basket. 3-year-olds, however, will say that she will look in the box. The 4-year-old understands that Sally's behavior is based on her beliefs, despite the fact that her beliefs are wrong. 3-year-olds, on the other hand, make a false belief error. Attributing their own knowledge of the marble's location to Sally, they will say that she will search in the box, which is the correct location. Thus, this pattern signifies a fundamental change in children's understanding of the centrality of beliefs in a person's thinking about the world. Therefore, by the age of 4, children realize that people not only have thoughts and beliefs, but that thoughts and beliefs are important in explaining why people do certain things. A theory of mind generally provides the preschool child with a powerful tool to explain, predict, and manipulate other people's behavior. It is closely related to social cognitive functioning, language development, fantasy, pretend play, pro-social behavior, and understanding and regulation of emotion. However, preschool children do not fully grasp reciprocal thought. That is, children at this age understand that other people think, but do not understand that other people can think about them. An understanding of the reciprocal nature of thought seems to develop between the ages of 5 and 7 for most children. This would seem to be particularly important understanding because it is necessary for the development of reciprocal friendships, which begin to emerge in the primary school years. In fact, the rate at which individual preschoolers develop a theory of mind is a good predictor of their social skills, both later in the early childhood and during the school years. Researchers have also found that a child's theory of mind is correlated with his or her performance on Piagetian tasks, as well as on more recently designed problems to assess egocentrism and appearance or reality. Factors that seem to contribute to children's development of theory of mind are pretend play and parent-child communication, where parents discuss emotion-provoking past events with them. Some studies also indicate that a mother's reading style affects her child's theory of mind. By using cognitive verbs such as think, how, remember, and believe when reading books to their children, mothers contribute to the children's latent ability to understand other people's mental states. However, theory of mind development does not occur randomly. Prior developments necessary for the acquisition of theory of mind are the following. They are self-awareness, the capacity for pretense, the ability to distinguish reality from pretense, understanding of emotions, and executive functions. Now let's look at each one in more detail. Self-awareness refers to the child's recognition of his or her own mental states. This is evident at quite an early age and may be seen in children's comments about their feelings and desires. Such ability represents a basic prerequisite for the understanding of mental operations generally. The capacity for pretense. From second year on, children are able to engage in make-believe play, including pretend play with dolls to which the child allocates various mental states. A powerful imagination, which is a prerequisite for being able to work out how other people function, is thus already present. Moving on to the ability to distinguish reality from pretense. Pretend play may involve children projecting their feelings onto dolls. Their ability to see what others are not just their ability to see that others are not just extensions of their desires is a later and more sophisticated development. Only when this appears will children no longer confuse the mental states given to other people with their own mental state. There is evidence that this does not become reliably established until the 4th year. Only then can children imagine other persons' beliefs and feelings as something apart from their own. Understanding emotions. Children understand emotions before they understand mental states. Children with earlier emerging and more sophisticated understanding of emotions will grasp false belief tasks more readily. Children who demonstrate an awareness of emotional states in themselves and in others may elicit more discussion of theory of mind understanding. Executive functions. Now, children's growing competence in executive functions provides an important platform for the acquisition of a theory of mind. For example, most children succeed in executive exhibition tasks before having a good understanding of false belief tasks. What about the cross-cultural application of theory of mind? Initially, research yielded contradictory results. The research proposed for this was partly that a single false belief task is not adequate to assess such complex development. It was evident that theory of mind should be examined through a wider lens to include diverse beliefs, false beliefs, diverse desires, access to knowledge, and hidden emotions. By incorporating these aspects into their research, Wellman and his colleagues could show that cross-cultural differences did not reflect differences in rates or extent of mastering theory of mind. Variations within cultural context inevitably exist within broad cultural consistent patterns. Therefore, children from collectivist cultures and individualistic cultures respectively will necessarily take different developmental routes towards the eventual mastery of their tasks. That is, a cross-cultural difference exists in the sequencing of theory of mind steps, but not in the overall rates of mastering theory of mind. The researchers conclude that collectivist family value emphasize consensual learning, acquisition of knowledge, and low tolerance for childhood critical and independent belief. Individualistic family values, on the other hand, encourage children to assert themselves and to learn the skills of reasoned argument. Alright, so moving on to Vygotsky's social cultural theory. Now, Lev Vygotsky, who was a contemporary of Piaget, criticized Piaget for the lack of cultural influences in his theory and made this a central aspect in his own theory. Vygotsky recognized that intrinsic development is important. Children do grow and learn from the inner maturational promptings and inventive spirit. However, Vygotsky believed that these forces alone would not take a child very far. To develop their minds fully, children also need the intellectual tools provided by their cultures, such as language, memory aids, numerical systems, writing, and scientific concepts. A major task of developmental theory is to understand how these tools are acquired. So, some of Vygotsky's contributions are as follows, which is firstly we'll look at the zone of proximal development. Now, this concept refers to the difference between the level of performance of a child may achieve when working independently and the higher level of performance when working under the guidance of more skilled adults or peers. According to Vygotsky, working within a child's zone, that is, by giving him adult or peer assistance, allows him to respond to his environment in more competent ways and to achieve more than he might by himself. This means that a more competent person collaborates with the child to move him from where he is now to where he can be. This is accomplished by means of prompts, clues, modeling, explanation, leading questions, discussion, joint participation, encouragement, and control of a child's attention. Vygotsky's theory places considerable emphasis on a child's potential for intellectual growth rather than their intellectual abilities at a particular point in time. Vygotsky's notion that finely tuned and coordinated adult support assists children in completing actions that they will later come to accomplish independently holds particular relevance for the education of children. One form of instruction inspired by Vygotskian thinking is scaffolding. This refers to temporary assistance provided by one person to a less skilled person when learning a new task. Adults provide assistance just slightly beyond the child's current competence, thus stimulating the child to reach a new level. To give the support or scaffold necessary for the child to accomplish a task, the adult or teacher may define the activity, demonstrate skills, or provide direct guidance. As the child begins to learn the task, the adult or teacher provides less instruction. The defining characteristics of scaffolding, giving help but not more than what is needed, promotes learning. Children do not learn readily when they are constantly told what to do or when they are simply left to struggle through a problem unaided. Scaffolding is an important technique for transferring skills from others to the child, both in formal settings such as schools and in informal settings such as the home or playground. Now, guided participation, which is a concept related to scaffolding, more often occurs in the context of play and other everyday activities. Guided participation refers to the participation of an adult in a child's activity in a manner that helps to construct the activity and to bear the child's understanding of it closer to that of the adult. This concept is useful in describing learning that takes place in informal schooling and by observation. Moving on to language and thought. Now, Piaget suggested that cognitive development comes first and in turn makes language development possible. Vygotsky disagreed with Piaget. He believed that language ability reflects almost every aspect of the child's thought. For him, language is a potent instrument in structuring thought and regulating cognitive behavior. Therefore, thinking would not be possible without language. Vygotsky emphasized that during early infancy, speech, or babbling, does not involve thought, and thought does not involve speech. However, at some point in the maturational process, generally at around the age of 2, speech and thought combine forces. When this occurs, they begin to influence each other mutually. Thought takes some verbal characteristics and speech becomes rational as an expressive outlet for thought. Vygotsky also differed from Piaget regarding to children's self-talk while playing. Piaget used the term egocentric speech for self-talk in children. To him, egocentric speech plays no functional role in cognitive development and is merely an example of children's general egocentrism during the preoperational stage, which disappears at the end of the preoperational stage. Vygotsky used the term private speech for children's self-talk, viewing it as an intermediate step towards the self-regulation of cognitive skills. At first, children's behavior is regulated by other speech directed toward them. When children first try to control their own behavior and thoughts without others present, they instruct themselves by speaking aloud. As children gain greater skill, private speech becomes inner speech at the ages of 6 or 7. This is an important tool for cognitive growth and is regarded as thought. Vygotsky suggested that logical thinking results from the internalization of speech routines acquired from older children and adults in the social world. More recent research has demonstrated that 2 to 5-year-olds do better in performance tasks when they talk to themselves than when they are silent. As children begin talking to themselves, their communication skills with the outside world improve. In fact, Wilsner and his co-authors advise adults to listen to the private speech of children. It is a wonderful window into their minds. These researchers also believe that private speech is helpful to children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. Children with autism who use private speech also show improved performance in tasks. Moving on to mechanisms of development. Vygotsky focused on change and its mechanisms, more than on the outcome or level of performance of the child. For Vygotsky, development follows a dialectical process of thesis, one idea of phenomenon, antithesis, an opposing idea or phenomenon, and synthesis, or resolution. This produces a higher level concept or more advanced functioning. These opposing forces, ideas, help or spontaneously these opposing forces, ideas, phenomena, and events, such as the child's level of cognitive functioning without and with an adult's help, or spontaneous or intuitive versus scientific concepts, confront, intertwine, and become transformed into a new, higher level. Thus, conflict and resolution play an important part in development. This dialectical process often occurs when children interact with adults or peers that are more advanced, for example, in the performance of tasks or in play, or when they use technological and psychological tools. As a child and an adult collaborate, the child gradually takes on more responsibility for problem solving or other activities. Language or cultural tools and observation of other people's activities contribute to the process of change. Once inner speech and various skilled activities are acquired, they in turn stimulate thinking that is advanced. Now, let us evaluate this theory. Vygotsky is probably the most important developmental theorist to address the broader socio-historical context of development. His main theoretical contribution is the account of the relationship between development and learning, one of the most important issues of cognitive development. Vygotsky argued that learning drives development. As children learn, they achieve a higher level of development. In turn, children's level of development affects their readiness to learn a new concept. However, Vygotsky's work suffers from one-sidedness. His accounts of intrinsic development are vague, while his research focuses largely on cultural forces. Therefore, he fails to address the interactions between intrinsic and cultural forces adequately. For example, he studied the way in which memory aids, writing skills, and scientific concepts transform the child's mind, but he did not examine the ways in which the child's inner spontaneous development might affect cultural forces. Alright, so we move on to the final one, which is the theory of information processing. Now, the information processing theorists take their inspiration from modern technology. They believe that cognitive development is a less consistent, more complex, and more multifaceted process than Piaget suggested in his stage theory. To explain inconsistency in reasoning and problem-solving abilities among children, information processing theorists look for changes that take place in a child's memory system. These memory systems are the following. So let's first look at short-term memory. Short-term memory is a child's working memory. Developmental changes in this area are apparent. As children progress through childhood, they are increasingly able to hold more material in the short-term memory. So let's take an example. If you ask 3-year-olds to repeat the digits 4, 7, 10, and 20, they may have some trouble. A 5-year-old, however, would find this an easy task. Additionally, young preschool children, find it more difficult to deal with simultaneous information than older school-age children. So, moving on to long-term memory. Long-term memory is regarded as our permanent storehouse of information. Since we generally remember very little before the age of 5, the question arises whether this long-term memory exists during early childhood. There are, however, indications that in spite of everyday forgetfulness and childhood amnesia, certain locations, rather certain kinds of long-term memory do occur even in early childhood. For example, 2-year-olds can often remember locations of objects seen many months earlier, and by the age of 3, many children can verbally recall events that occurred up to 18 months in the past. When the experience is repeated once, such as a bedtime routine, however, the particulars of specific occasions become clouded with a general memory of the routine. For example, children will find it difficult to describe a bedtime routine of a week ago and will only be able to describe what usually happens at bedtime. This generic knowledge is called script knowledge, but this particular example described is the bedtime script. So, memory strategies. An especially important aspect of information processing theory is the use of memory strategies. Memory strategies consist of deliberate mental activities to improve the processing and storing of information. Two of the most investigated memory strategies are rehearsal, in which a child repeats the target information, and retrieval, the process of accessing information and entering it into the consciousness. A large part of the changes that take place in a child's cognitive processes during their developmental may be ascribed to the changes in the memory strategies. These skills progressively improve as children get older. For example, young children are less likely than older children to use rehearsal, in which they repeat material silently or aloud, and as a result hold verbal material in short-term memory less effectively than older children do. Young children are also less proficient than older children are in accessing or retrieving information from the memory stage. The development of retrieval strategies consists of an increasing ability to search memory intelligently, efficiently, flexibly, systematically, and selectively to address the problem required. As discussed in the let's move on to metamemory and metacognition. Information processing theorists also maintain that children's ability to make efficient use of the memory system is influenced by cognitive processes such as metamemory and metacognition. Metamemory refers to the knowledge of memory skills and the appropriate use of these strategies. For example, young children know that it takes longer to memorize a list of 10 words than a list of 5 words. However, between the ages of 2 and 6, children often do not know what to do, and so often children between the ages of 2 and 6, children often do not know what to do when they have to remember something. Therefore, they cannot use effective strategies for more difficult tasks that require efficient use of memory system. Metacognition refers to knowledge about and control of thought processes. For example, a girl listening to a story being read on her may realize she has forgotten the main character's name and ask the reader what it is. Both knowing that the character's name has been forgotten and knowing that the character's name will make the story easier to understand are forms of metacognition. Moreover, metacognitive processes enable the child to generate a strategy, such as asking the reader who will solve the problem. And finally, executive functioning. This refers to the conscious control of thoughts, emotions, actions to accomplish goals or to solve problems. Executive functioning enables children to plan and carry out goal-oriented mental activity. It emerges around the age of the first year of life and seems to develop in spurts with age. Changes in executive function between the age 2 and 5 years enable children to make up and use complex rules for problem solving. As mentioned earlier, it also seems that executive functioning facilitates children's performance in tasks involving theory of mind. Now we will be moving on to the second section of cognitive development, and this is language development. So, let's get started on language development. During early childhood, toddlers move very quickly from two-word utterances to creating multiple-word utterances. By the age of 2 years, they can produce sentences of up to 4 or 5 words, and by 3 years, up to 8 words. However, counting the number of words they use is not a good measure of language development. Therefore, researchers use a measure called the mean length of utterance, or MLU, to calculate the complexity of children's language usage, usually the average number of morphemes in a set utterance and not the number of words. Between 2 to 3 years of age, they begin the transition from using simple sentences to complex utterances. Language acquisition occurs according to certain processes that seem to be present in most languages. Children's accomplishments in language development include the following. Vocabulary is one of them, and then we have phonology and morphology, grammar and syntax, and the pragmatic use of language, and emergent literacy. But yeah, let's get started with vocabulary. Vocabulary spurt occurs between the ages of 16 months and 2 years. Further rapid expansion occurs between the ages of 3 and 6 years. By the age of 3, the child knows and can use approximately 900 to 1,000 words. And by the age of 6, most children have a receptive and expressive vocabulary or lexicon of about 10,000 to 20,000 words. This implies that they learn several new words per day. This rapid expansion of vocabulary may occur through a process called fast mapping, which allows a child to pick up the approximate meaning of a word after hearing it only twice. This brief introduction is sufficient for at least some children to restructure their lexical domains, probably by forming a quick hypothesis about the meaning of the word. This is followed by a slower process called extended mapping, which involves further exposure and usage of the particular word. Thus, an entry for the new word is made along with some syntactic or grammatical and semantic or meaning features, after which the child learns the full meaning of the word. Linguists do not fully understand how fast mapping works, but it seems that children draw on their knowledge about the rules for forming words, similar words, and immediate context and subject under discussion. Names of objects or nouns seem to be easier to fast map than the names of actions or verbs that are less concrete. Despite these advances in vocabulary, children's early vocabulary still contains many immaturities. For example, underextensions may occur. This refers to the tendency to restrict the usage of a word, such as the word for juice only for orange juice and not for other fruit juices. In contrast to this highly specific use of words, overextensions also occur in children's early speech. This refers to the usage for a word for a wider variety of objects or reference that is incorrect, such as using the word dog for another four-legged animal such as a horse. However, this does not mean that the child thinks a dog is a horse, but rather that they do not know the word for horse and use dog, which resembles the animal the closest. Phonology and morphology. Phonology refers to the sounds of language. Children have acquired a rule system for pairing sound with meaning. During the preschool years, children become perceptive to the sounds of the spoken word and are increasingly capable of producing the sounds of their language. In fact, by the age of 3, children are capable of producing all the vowel sounds and most of the consonants. Children typically like rhymes and songs and make up silly words by substituting the sounds. Morphology. This refers to the smallest language unit that has meaning in order to structure a word, such as adding an S to indicate plural or an ed to indicate the past tense. By the time children begin to use more words in a sentence, they start demonstrating knowledge of morphology rules. They begin to use plural and possessive forms, such as 2 dogs or a dog's food. They put appropriate endings to verbs such as an S for a third-person singular verb and an ed for the past tense. They use prepositions such as in and on, articles such as a and the various forms of the verb to be. As a result, they not only use more words in sentences, but the sentences also become more complex as they add grammatical morphemes to words. Some of the best evidence of the development of children's morphological rules is evidence of their overgeneralization of the rules, such as when a preschooler says foot instead of feet, or goed instead of went. Another interesting example is that as children acquire these morphemes, they use this new language of verb morphology to create new verbs from nouns. For example, a 3-year-old pretending to be Superman says, "I'm Supermaning," or a 4-year-old pointing to the decorated Christmas tree says, "We already decorationed our tree." Now moving on to grammar and syntax. The development of grammar, which is the rules of language, and syntax, which is combining words in meaningful phrases and sentences according to grammatical rules, becomes increasingly complex during early childhood. By the age of 3, typically children begin to use plurals, possessives, and the past tense. They also know the difference between I, you, and we. They can ask and answer what and where questions. However, their sentences are generally short, simple, and declarative. Between the ages 4 and 5, with the increase of MLU, children's sentences also become more complex to include sentence types such as negatives, questions, imperatives, and compound sentences. They also tend to string sentences together in long stories by linking them with and then. In some cases, comprehension may still be somewhat immature, especially if a command includes more than one element. 4-year-old Tobello will be able to understand his mother's commands. Tobello, pick up your toys and put them in the basket, because the sequence of what needs to be done is logical. However, if his mother says, "You may watch TV," after you have picked up all your toys and put them in the basket, Tobello may process the words in the order which he hears them, to first watch TV and then to pick up the toys. Between the ages of 5 and 7, children's speech becomes quite adult-like. They are able to use longer and more complex sentences characterized by conjunctions, prepositions, articles, and multiple clauses. This enables them to converse effectively and tell a story. However, although they may speak fluently, comprehensively, and grammatically correct, they have not yet mastered all aspects of language development. For example, they rarely use the passive voice or conditional sentences, and tend to overgeneralize. Alright, so let's talk about the pragmatic use of language. Now, pragmatic language refers to the rules of using language effectively and appropriately in social context and according to social conventions. These are all aspects of social speech, which is speech intended to be understood by a listener. This means children have to develop the practical knowledge to use language socially to communicate. From an early age, children learn the rules of etiquette, such as to say please and thank you, how to address people correctly according on the context, and how to change the content and intonation of speech depending on the status and identity of the listener. For example, younger brothers and sisters are addressed differently than older ones, and siblings are addressed differently than parents and school teachers. Developments in the pragmatic use of language are associated with theory of mind. In fact, it has been found that children who perform best in false belief tasks are also the most active communicators in shared pretend play situations. The assumption is that in order to use language socially, one has to be aware of others' emotions and beliefs, know how to tell a story or joke, how to begin a conversation, and how to adjust comments to the listener's perspective. With the improved pronunciation and grammar, it becomes easier for others to understand what children say. This facilitates reciprocal conversation. Most 3-year-olds are quite talkative and can pay attention to the effect of their speech on others. They even try to explain themselves more clearly if they are not being understood. Most 4-year-olds use parentese, which is language with a higher pitch usually used by parents when addressing infants when they talk to younger children. Most 5-year-olds can adapt what they say to the listener's perspective. They can use words to resolve disputes, and they are also able to stick to conversational topic, especially if they are comfortable with their conversational partner and if they are interested in the topic. Now, moving on to the last one, which is emergent literacy. This refers to the development of skills that are needed for understanding the printed word. These skills are called pre-reading skills and can be divided into two types: oral language skills and phonological skills. Oral language skills are vocabulary, syntax, and oral narrative skills, and phonological skills are linking letters with sounds that facilitate the decoding of the printed word. So, to achieve a functional level of literacy, children must master a few basic skills. Firstly, they need to be able to recognize letters. This does not simply mean recognizing A is different from B, but also recognizing that the same letter may take different forms. For example, a capital A, a small a, an italic A, a bold A, etc. Secondly, they need to understand grapheme, phoneme correspondence rules. This means that they have to recognize which sounds correspond to which letter symbols. Some languages are more transparent and easier to decode on the letter-to-sound level. Other languages are exceptionally opaque to many letter-to-sound rules that are often not predictable and often depend on the letters surrounding the words, such as the letter I in bit sounds different to bite. Thirdly, they must be able to recognize words. When they can recognize whole words, they no longer have to spell each word as a series of competent sounds. And fourthly, they need to recognize the meanings of words and their relation to real-world references. And now moving on to the last section, which is cognitive development and the media. Children are exposed in various forms of media when they grow up: television, radio, the internet, iPads, Nintendo Wii, Xbox, PlayStation, you name it. However, most research has been done on television viewing, which will be the focus of this discussion. Criticisms of the effects of television on children, particularly preschool age children, have emerged since its introduction. Critics can be divided broadly into two categories: those that are generally against television viewing regardless of content, and those that are against certain kinds of television viewing. Criticism of young children's television viewing generally fall into four overlapping categories. And these categories are displaced time, passivity, shallow information, and visual iconic view. So, the displaced time view argues that television viewing harms cognitive development because it takes away time from other activities that are more beneficial, such as reading or pretend play. The passivity view holds that because it takes little effort to watch television, habitual inactivity may result. The shallow information processing view posits that the rapid and short segments typically of many television shows over the time result in shorter attention spans and difficulty in sustaining focus. The visual iconic view argues that television viewing selectively enhances visual information processing at the possible expense of verbal processing, which can lead to lowered ability to imagine or infer information that is not explicitly present. However, studying the effects of television viewing on young children is not that easy. As we know, a correlation does not indicate causality. To determine causality, researchers should in fact test children before the introduction of television watching and then thereafter, which would probably be impossible. Rather, it would definitely be impossible. In addition, many types of program content may have different effects. According to research, it seems plausible that what preschoolers watch rather than how much might be an important predicator to what the effect on behavior will be. Preschoolers are more inclined to watch cartoons and educational programs than any other type of program. Educational programs for young children have become increasingly frequent since the 1970s. These programs typically promote skills such as letter, number, shape, and color recognition, names of body parts, categorization and classification skills, and knowledge of position. Educational television programs aimed at preschoolers do not focus exclusively on cognitive skills. Emotional awareness, empathy, social and constructive attitudes, and multicultural exposure is also addressed. Research has consistently indicated that well-designed, age-appropriate educational program enhances preschoolers' social, vocabulary, school readiness, literacy, and numeracy skills. However, these results should not be taken as an endorsement of constant television viewing by preschoolers of all ages. In fact, heavy television usage, watching non-educational cartoons, and television viewing by children under the age of 2 years are not conducive to their optimal development. Viewing of inappropriate media could have long-lasting effects on children that may induce fear and anxiety. However, the general point is that well-constructed educational television programs designed for preschoolers can have beneficial results for their cognitive and social development. Well-constructed media can also provide children with a way of developing their personal strengths and may help them negotiate future life challenges, since these programs typically include topics such as creative problem solving, self-acceptance, models of self-efficacy, humor, and optimism. As mentioned earlier, less is known about the influences of other media. However, it can be assumed that media games such as the Xbox are geared towards the development of perceptual skills, planning, and problem-solving skills. Commercially available games such as the Nintendo Wii, also referred to as Exer games, could enhance children's active screen time, since it involves active participation. Such game-based learning for children could be regarded as convenient and effective way to disseminate knowledge and change behavior that led to obesity due to inactivity. Children will consume media, whether we like it or not. The good news is that adults can influence how children use media. The key to work toward helping children choose time for physical and play activities and to help them choose programs with the pro-social and educational content. In this way, children will develop media literacy. Here are a few suggestions for healthier media usage. Help children to consume media in a healthier manner by differentiating between entertainment and reality. Adults can help children become media literate by deconstructing commercials and watching programming critically. The ideal is to watch television with the child to comment on content and to answer questions. Also, share television viewing as family time. Young children should not have a television or internet access in their bedrooms. Also, limit viewing to certain times of the day. Choose not only program content wisely, but also in proportion to other activities. Regard media as an excellent resource of information to better understand the world. So, early childhood education rather. So this is the final chapter. So going to pre-primary school is an important step that widens a child's physical, cognitive, and social environment. The early years are critical for the acquisition of concepts, skills, and attitudes that lay the foundation for lifelong learning rather. This includes the acquisition of linguistic and literacy skills necessary for reading and communication, motor perceptual skills required for writing, basic numeracy concepts and skills, problem-solving skills, and love for learning. Approaches in teaching young children are on the next page. So we will only look at the three most popular ones, which is the child-centered approach, direct instruction, and the Montessori approach. So, the child-centered approach. Nurturing is a key aspect of this approach, which emphasizes the education of the whole child and concerns his or her physical, cognitive, and social emotional development. Instruction is organized around the child's needs, interests, and learning styles. Emphasis is on the emphasis is on the process of learning rather than what is learned. The child-centered approach honors three principles. A. Each child follows a unique developmental pattern. B. Young children learn best through first-hand experiences with children and materials. And lastly, play is extremely important to the child's total development. Experimenting, exploring, restructuring, speaking, and listening are frequent activities in excellent pre-primary programs. Furthermore, the teacher takes responsibility for stimulating, directing, and supporting children's learning by providing the experiences that each child needs. The curriculum is planned to help children achieve goals that are developmentally and educationally significant. Since it is believed that a positive partnership between teachers and families benefits children's learning and development, reciprocal relationships with families are also established. This type of preschool instruction is referred to as developmentally appropriate practice. However, the quality of developmentally appropriate instruction often varies and is an evolving concept. In fact, it seems that not all children benefit from this approach. Moving on to the second one, which is direct instruction. Now, this method relies on abstract paper and pencil activities presented to large groups of children. The emphasis is on direct academic instruction with extensive use of workbooks, worksheets, and rote drill or practice. Children are also mostly seat-bound. This method largely ignores the concrete hands-on approach to learning. This approach is often called developmentally inappropriate as it does not consider the child's developmental needs. Social emotional development is also neglected. Furthermore, research has indicated that children taught in these classrooms show slower growth in vocabulary and maths application. And finally, the Montessori approach. I've also included a picture of Maria Montessori down below. So yes, Montessori schools are patterned after the educational philosophy of Maria Montessori. She was an Italian physician who later became an educator. In the Montessori approach, children are given considerable freedom and spontaneity in choosing activities. They are allowed to move from one activity to another as they desire, while the teacher acts as a facilitator rather than an instructor. The teacher shows the children how to perform intellectual activities, demonstrates interesting ways to explore materials. They offer help when needed. Although this method has a large following, it has been criticized. Some critics say that it neglects children's social development since it emphasizes independence and cognitive skills and de-emphasizes verbal teacher and peer interaction. They also argue that it restricts imaginative play and that reliance on self-corrective materials may not adequately allow for creativity or for a variety of learning styles. Today's lesson. If you have any questions, please do send me an email. My email is there at the bottom. And I hope you learned something new, and I hope you have a wonderful day further.